his presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Guyana Action Party, a member of the coalition, I stand to make my contribution on the Planning and Development Single Window System Bill. But before I delve into the substance, something seems wrong today in the House. I'm accustomed to hearing members of the government, whenever they speak, to mention discrepancies in elections. Today, nothing was said by them. And I wonder why, and then I know why. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we also listened to the Honorable Susan Rodriguez, who mentioned that digital transformation didn't happen under the APNU-AFC. But I have a list of what were done, achieved from 2016 to 2029, of which I'll just read a few, so we can educate her and the others on the other side. Mr. Speaker, we put in operation the fiber optic cable. We provided internet access free to primary, secondary schools, more than 400 government ministries, NDCs, RDCs, etc. Under the ICT for hinterland poor and remote communities, we provided internet to more than 100 communities. Free internet to residential schools, ICT hubs, over 200, hotspots at community centers, smart city program in GT, hinterland radio stations, and more. And we did not waste $5 million US on a failed fiber optic cable. And when you go into the Rupunun, you see a little stick standing up with a wire hanging down. $5 million US gone there. And the Honorable Susan Rodriguez did not even support her minister, so to speak, her boss. Did not. The Honorable Colin Cole said that the bill will be taken to a special select committee. She said opposite. This reminds me of the Bible, the Tower of Babel, where everybody began to speak different languages. And if you research the Tower of Babel, you will find the reason why God made that happen to them, if I could use that word, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, however, please allow me to express my heartfelt appreciation to Mr. Carl Greenwich and his team, including the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who with the patriotism and leadership skills like that of the Honorables LFS Burnham and Chelly Jagan, fathers of our nation, in the first rung at the International Court of Justice, successfully defended our sovereignty. We applaud them and pray that the Almighty continues to stand by them on our behalf as they continue to represent us. We also wish to thank the APNU-AFC, who when in government not only made wise decisions on our behalf at the most sensitive time, but also made available the signing bonus of 18 million US to cover costs associated with this most crucial defense of our territorial integrity. Mr. Speaker, the single window system bill at a first glance seemed to be innovative and people-oriented. But when one starts to study it, one finds it to be disingenuous and in need of lots of tweaking to make it palatable. Mr. Speaker, in the bill, planning and development application means an application made under any enactment in respect of land use, building, or development permission, or other similar application of the kind listed under the first schedule. Mr. Speaker, is the PPP saying that even the enactment called the Amerindian Act of 2006 is to be engulfed or superseded by this bill should it become an act? Mr. Speaker, for this bill to begin to get a modicum of support from the indigenous community and right-thinking Guyanese, then the Amerindian Act of 2006 has to be strengthened inter alia to allow the following. One, a provisional clause to be included that all indigenous lands, be it on the surface, subsurface, and inclusive of its cover, waterways, and atmosphere, are excluded from interference by this bill. Two, also all lands that are identified as ancestral lands of the First Nations of Guyana should be exempted from being interfered by this bill. Three, all lands contiguous to indigenous titled, non-titled, and ancestral lands must not be interfered by this bill without the free, prior informed consent of the indigenous peoples who stand to suffer the consequences of negative side effects of developments alone. Done. Mr. Speaker, whenever I come and speak on behalf of the indigenous people, there are certain honorables who stand against it. And I wonder why are so against the indigenous peoples whom they depend on so much when time for the voting to happen. Mr. Speaker, the bill focuses on land use development as one of its components. On examination of the bill, one notices that it insulates itself from the realities of living in Guyana. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to ignore that the first peoples of Guyana inhabit the hinterland of Guyana, and any laws made must protect their rights and safeguard their livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, this bill will open a Pandora's box that will see the further erosion of the rights and the destruction of the peaceful coexistence with nature of the indigenous peoples. Mr. Speaker, why is it when we are advocating for the rights of the indigenous people that the PPP stands against that? Why? Mr. Speaker, currently there are many indigenous communities that are anxiously awaiting on their applications for land extensions to be made legal. Mr. Speaker, it is no secret that there are hungry eyes just waiting on opportunities to grab indigenous lands, whether titled or untitled, and say that they are doing that in the name of development. This bill seemingly seeks to facilitate the land grabbers at the expense of the indigenous peoples. Mr. Speaker, as detailed in a Starbuck News article dated December 17, 2022, entitled "Court Recognizes Ancestral Lands Rights of Upper Mazaruni Villages," and I quote, "In what will be seen as a historic decision, the Chief Justice has confirmed the rights of indigenous peoples of the Upper Mazaruni to their ancestral lands. She made it clear, however, that those rights are subject to state lands titles and therefore could not be regarded as being to the exclusion of others." End of quote. Mr. Speaker, it is opposite to note that the matter has not reached its finality, and because of this, some unscrupulous persons may seek to take advantage of the uncertainty and use the bill, if enacted, to trample on the rights of the indigenous peoples. Mr. Speaker, a classic example of avoidance behavior described by the PPP was recently exposed. The people of Napi Village, South Central, were promised by the PPP prior to the last general and regional elections that if they voted for them, they would be granted their land extensions. It must be noted that the land promise had been under a lease to the Pirara Ranch that had expired. However, the indigenous peoples of Napi were recently shocked when the Amerindian land titling team of the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs informed them that the Pirara lease had already been secretly renewed. Mr. Speaker, the bill before us speaks of confidentiality. If this is the kind of confidentiality or secrecy that this bill represents, then we, the indigenous peoples, do not welcome it. Mr. Speaker, some may say that the Amerindian Act of 2006 can defend the indigenous peoples against land grabbers. But as mentioned before, the Amerindian Act did not help the people of Napi. Mr. Speaker, the Amerindian Act did not defend the people of Chinese landing, where the community contended that the government granted a medium-scale mining concession to a miner in its title lands without consulting or seeking the consent of the community. This led to the village seeking the intervention of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination and recommendations made by the body to the Guyana government, including consideration be given to suspending or revoking the mining concession that affects the land, territories, or resources of the Chinese landing until free prior informed consent is granted by the indigenous peoples, and also refraining from approving projects and granting mining permits or concessions within the lands of indigenous peoples, whether titled or not, and incorporating the principles of FPIC in domestic legislation, including by amending the Amerindian Act of 2006, with indigenous peoples' participation, and to fully and adequately guarantee the right to consultation of the indigenous peoples, and considering the ratifying the ILO Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention of 169. Mr. Speaker, the Amerindian Act did not defend the indigenous people of the Seneru. Mr. Speaker, back in the 1990s, permission was granted by the Guyana Geologian Mines Commission to a miner to operate within the boundaries of the village title lands. However, the village has been up in arms over this approval, which said it did not have the consent of the village. This matter has reached the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, ISCHR, an autonomous organ of the Organization of American States, which ruled that Guyana is responsible for at least 16 violations of the rights of the communities and its members, as a result of which Guyana law will have to be amended. Among the conclusion of the commission was that the right to health, food, water, as well as the rights of children and mothers had been violated. Mr. Speaker, the ISCHR recommended that the Guyana government...
Point of order.
Honorable member, the minister has raised on a point of order.
The honorable member is being irrelevant to the bill. Mr. Speaker, under 41(1), this bill has nothing to do with what the honorable member is speaking. Maybe he might like to have a press conference outside with the media to air his views on this matter, but this has nothing to do with the bill that is before us. Mr. Speaker, I'm asking that you caution and ask the Speaker to return to the bill.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, I was waiting to hear the honorable member now connect to the bill, and I'm sure he's going to do so shortly.
Mr. Speaker, I have been given a certain amount of minutes, and within that certain amount of minutes, I will bring all together. You may rest assured. Mr. Speaker, the IACH recommended that the Guyana government conduct full reparations to the people of Isenru. Mr. Speaker, further to this issue, the PPP government, in response to the IACHR to this matter, responded that the Isenru villages have abandoned their traditional ways and customs by engaging in a cash economy, as opposed to subsistence living. Also, And I quote, the state also argues that the central community members have lost their traditional culture in aspects such as their building materials, their architecture, and their farming systems. The state particularly emphasizes that most of the members of the community have converted to Christianity and therefore do not preserve an ancestral spiritual connection to their territory. These statements speak volumes to the fact that this government, the PPP-1, is not keen to have the rights of the indigenous peoples protected. According to the above, the PPP does not see any.
Okay, honorable member, we have given quite a bit of latitude. We now have to come back to the substantive bill, the single window. And I was waiting to hear your plea for this particular initiative that you're on, connect to the single window.
Mr. Speaker, I have one more paragraph and then I'll connect it with.
I now ask that you come back to the bill substantively.
Mr. Speaker, I raise these issues to show that the guardrails that are there to protect the rights and the livelihoods of the indigenous peoples are rapidly being weakened and eroded under the government of the PPP. Mr. Speaker, so I will skip that paragraph. Mr. Speaker, the Amerindian Act allows the minister to sanction Tushas who are perceived to be non-supporters of the PPP, but allows the minister to ignore malfeasance done by.
Honorable member, I would now again ask that you speak to the bill itself. How would the single window improve access to the Amerindian people for their applications? I think that's where you want to go.
Mr. Speaker, the PPP, when criticized for not allowing free prior informed consent before the 15% of the carbon credit sales was unilaterally paid to indigenous communities, replied by saying that they consulted with the National Tushas Council.
Honorable member, honorable member, honorable member. I said that I think that was where you may want to go, but you choose to continue on a path that is for another contribution. We are speaking to the single window. And if you don't have any more connects to the single window, then
Mr. Speaker, please allow me to make the following recommendations to correct the omissions as I see it from an indigenous eye. 1, the Amerindian Act of Guyana should be revised as a matter of utmost urgency with the full involvement of the indigenous peoples. A provisional clause to be included that all indigenous lands, be it on surface, subsurface, and inclusive of its cover, waterways and atmosphere are excluded from interference by this bill. Also, all lands that are identified as ancestral lands of the First Nations of Guyana should be exempted from interference by this bill. Also, all lands contiguous to indigenous titled, non-titled, and ancestral lands must not be interfered by this bill without due, free, prior informed consent of the indigenous people, who stand to suffer the consequences of negative side effects of development. Mr. Speaker, anyone can see that this bill, though well-meaning, can cause untold trampling of the rights and livelihoods of the indigenous peoples of Guyana. Therefore, on behalf of the indigenous peoples of Guyana, I humbly request that the somewhat self-regulatory Amerindian Act of 2006 must not be governed by this bill. Should it be enacted, and that the clause of this bill should reflect this. Mr. Speaker, I propose that the Amendment Act be left as a standalone to defend the interests of the indigenous peoples of Guyana. However, as postulated before, it should be urgently revised to serve its intended purpose. Mr. Speaker, also I do recommend that this bill be sent to a special select committee, and I do thank you for your patience. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. The Honorable Member and Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, the Honorable Member, Mr. Nigel Darmlad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon, everyone. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand in solidarity with the Minister of Housing and Water in supporting this bill and to also promote the movement of this bill to a select committee. But whilst I do so, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make some clarifications. And I want to put on record, as we have always done, the Amerindian people of Guyana, the best support that they have ever gotten is from the People's Progressive Party. The APNU AFC, when they were in government, a minister of government then used words to the effect that Amerindian people were greedy. Those people, they were avaricious because a policy of ours, monies garnered from the oil industry as well as the LCDS and extended LCDS, we decided that resources will go, substantial resources will go towards the development of Amerindian communities, including their land. And a former minister of the APNU-AFC said that Amerindian people should not get any of it, that they were too avaricious. Words to that effect. And there are people, and in the parliament too, when they were in government. So, and let me also, I have a note here, Mr. Speaker. As they're speaking about Amerindian development, in SLED, $371.75 million were allocated through SLED in the last government. And Mr. Speaker, out of that $228 million went to Region 9, to more than 24 quote-unquote cooperative societies. Many of those cooperative societies, quote-unquote, were formed on the instructions of Congress Place. And I have in these notes, Mr. Speaker, the person that spoke before me, his son benefited up to $19 million.
Honorable Minister. You'd have to withdraw that because the honorable member's son is not in here to defend himself.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so I withdraw saying the son, but I can tell you that the name of the person who spoke before me is cited in the report. Cited in the report. So when they speak of corruption, when they speak of Amerindian development,
we're gonna have to ask you to withdraw corruption, please.
corruption is a bad word?
Yeah, unparliamentary.
Oh, it's unparliamentary. Well, the siphoning off of taxpayers' monies to the political purposes of the APNU-AFC. We cannot countenance that in a democracy. We will never be able to countenance that in a democracy. But further to this, Mr. Speaker, in that same report, 2 buildings were supposed to be constructed, and the location, and I would like to ask the members of the opposition, especially those who reside at Congress Place, There were 2 buildings that received monies through quote unquote, again, cooperative societies, never registered cooperative societies. The address of where the monies went is Congress Place, Sophia. So when the auditors went to check on the buildings, I have in possession again the report where a senior member of the opposition chased the people out when they went to check on the construction. None of the buildings had anything inside. Block making, poultry farming, that is what they were doing with taxpayers' monies at Congress Place. They were mining fowl and making blocks. But when we turned up there, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. So if they want to speak about democracy and good governance in ensuring that, Mr. Speaker, that is why we want a single window system, because the approvals process must be free. It must be de-risked of political influence. That is why. And I can also tell you too, Mr. Speaker, that same report has a lot of information about the barbershop and about every other region and what they have done with $372+ million of taxpayers' money. And that is why we should not also countenance some of the suggestions that Honorable Mahipal has put forth in the suggested amendments, because they want to retain political control. They want to have political influence. But President Ali has made a commitment that in modernizing Guyana, that in ensuring that we build local democracy, in ensuring that we enhance local governance, we have to de-risk political influence. And that is why this bill is situated in the way it is situated, because we want to have, as my colleague Susan Rodriguez, honorable member, said, it is built on an independent system. That is why, Mr. Speaker, we would like to have a single window system to build efficiency, to build transparency, as our honorable Prime Minister is saying, to ensure that there is cost effectiveness in the manner of business, to ensure that there is compliance, and to ensure that there is enhanced security of the approval system. Quite unlike, none of those 5 guiding principles were evident, were practiced during the course of the AP and UFC. You know why, Mr. Speaker? Because they have many members there who have constructed buildings. There is one person, Mr. Speaker, from the Eccles-Ramsburg NDC area, whose house, unfortunately, is incomplete at this time.
Be careful, Honorable Minister, I'm from there.
Not you, Mr. Speaker, with the exception of the Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, that building doesn't have approval. The fence doesn't have approval. The businessman who was constructing it after the government change stopped constructing it. So the building and the fence, they are both incomplete. It's around the massive, I think it's the house, when they started to build the house became bigger than the land. So they had to get 2 additional house lots. That is outside of the mall, it is the most ostentatious property in the Eccles-Ramsburg NDC area. And then the same person that is heckling currently does not have approval from the Horstelling Farm NDC for the construction of their building. That same person that is heckling me right now, Mr.
So the honorable member, Mr. Mahipal, is now in the area. This is the only person I hear heckling.
Mr. Speaker, I shall not call name, but Mahipal knows who I'm speaking about, the honorable member, Mr. Mahipal. And so too, there is one who says some of the most outrageous things about the PPPC from Coven John. They have no approval because we checked the system. They have no approval as well. So, Mr. Speaker, we would like this single window system is going to massively reduce, but I don't want to use this unparliamentary term corruption, but it will reduce the misuse and the inconsistencies in the management of public resources. It will also remove, to a large extent, subjectivity, because we have evidence too. When in the last government, and I personally have evidence, when in the last government, they denied approvals. And in one case, there's a particular minister of government currently whose family was denied a construction permit because they are a member of the People's Progressive Party Civic. And that NDC is an NDC run by the APNU AFC. So we have to remove subjectivity and political influence. Also, Mr. Speaker, the single window system adds value to our revenue yields. But I say revenue yields not in terms of how APNU AFC impose hardship measures on poor people across this country, but increase revenue yields through how fees will be paid, quite unlike fees being paid willy-nilly across different agencies that are involved. And what about cutting costs? One of the most distressing things about constructing a building, I have a lot to say about you, Ramjatan. I have quite a lot to say about you, quite a lot to say about you. I have a lot to say about you. I also have a copy of the bank account information that you have overseas, and the amount of money and who transferred the money to you. So you should be.
Wow. Folks, we are looking there, of course, at the proceedings on the floor as we continue our coverage for the 63rd sitting of the National Assembly. Folks, we thank you very much for being a part of the program. We just had the displeasure, I might say, of listening to the despot, tin pot dictator, we like to call him, Minister of Regional Development, Dharamlal Deer. And I want to point out to those folks who are part of the live stream, we want to thank you very much. To share the live stream also, we might be taking for granted some of the things that Minister Dharamlal is saying, and his approach on giving his comment on this single window is very instructive. I want people to understand. He mentioned just now that the APNU AFC would have denied the NDC, that the APNU AFC was in charge of, denied somebody from the PPP permission to put up some building. And I want you to understand part of the reasoning behind this single window system is to ensure that the power is consolidated in the hands of central government. I want you to understand that, because it is part of the petty and vindictive nature of this administration that he could come on the floor of this house and tell people that some NDC some time back denied one of the PPP members' family permission to put up a building. And it is for those reasons that we are pointing out that part of the reasoning behind this bill is a power grab. Part of the reasoning behind this bill, right, is a power grab. And you can hear him, how he has a lot to say about Member of Parliament Ramjatan, about bank accounts and who put money in bank accounts. This is the nature of the petty, vindictive, low-life politics of this administration. And Minister Damlal is one of the key persons who perpetuate this low-life gutter politics. That is his nature. And so when you hear him talk about who did what when, who building go up in this community, who put up building here, who will get permission to put up building there, it is part of the entire system of trying to grab power and ensure that they control what happens at every NDC in this country, folks. And so though the bill, in my view, has some good things to offer when it comes to reducing red tape. Though the bill has some good things to offer when it comes to reducing red tape, there is a bigger and a more sinister plot afoot here, folks. And this is why when our members talk about consultation, they talk about listening to the other side, that these are the concerns that are coming up when we talk to our NDC people, when we talk to our RDC people, right? This is what is happening, and we have to be aware of it. I hope that our operator could just lower the music a little bit, right? And we have to be aware of it. If you listen carefully, you will hear. If you listen carefully, you will hear the vindictive, petty nature of this minister, and by extension, the PPP's policy. And we have to be careful with this bill. This is why when we are airing these programs, we're hoping that we disseminate the information carefully, and we break down, we unpack the information so that you understand. I was listening to Damlal carefully, and I don't take for granted the fact that he said, hey, sometime back, some NDC denied somebody permission, some PPP member permission to put up some building. And so this consolidation of power into central government, it is not only with this bill, but we see a consistent attempt to take power from local organs and communities. Part of the first thing that Damlal did when he came into power, when he became the Minister of Local Government and Regional Development, was to dictate to NDCs what they should buy with the subventions that they're getting. People were instructed to buy crush and run. NDCs were instructed that they have to take these lights. It's a clear plan to ensure that power is consolidated. And, you know, yesterday, Mr. Vincent Alexander, speaking on the Nation Watch program, articulated it best when he stated, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the PPP government is not interested in local government. They are going to hold the local government election because that is what the Constitution recommends, and it's a sexy thing to do. Everybody's talking about it, so let's go with it. But what is happening behind the scenes? Daily, we are seeing attempts to strip the power from those local organs, right? Strip the power from those local organs and consolidate the power at central government. So Damlal can sit down in his office and say, this NDC, we want this happen. Or, yes, now let's break this down for you folks. And I'm hoping that these are issues, and I know that these are issues that will be brought up as our MPs articulate the position and the concerns of those persons in the NDCs and the RDCs and the local or local bodies, their concerns and their fears that they will be powerless when it comes to administrating certain things in their communities. Now, let's just imagine that you are in an NDC somewhere in Region 7, and some big construction company wants to put up a building, and they would have done their EIA and they would have done all these feasibility checks and all manner of things. And the reality is that this building would affect the adversely affect the community in some way or the other. That NDC, really and truly, when this bill is passed, really is powerless. They can make recommendations, but the body that controls this whole single window approach now has the power, and these are the concerns. And I'm hoping, right? I'm hoping, right? Hoping that we can deal with this. Folks, we have an MP standing by to talk with us as we continue our presentation. We have MP. Hold on, I think my mic is right. Sorry about that. Yes, folks, we have MP Henry standing by to give us his thoughts. MP, thank you very much for being a part of the program. Welcome, welcome, welcome as we continue to break down what is happening in Parliament. MP, how are you doing?
I'm okay. Good afternoon to listeners. Good afternoon to you. Glad to be on the
Good
show.
afternoon. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. And I see you with your attire, and my mind goes back to the speaker saying that the parliamentary committee would have met and they would have hashed out in terms of dress code. I hope that that your attire doesn't infringe on the rules. And let me have a conversation before we get into some of the other issues. On that, what are your thoughts on the issue of dress code in Parliament? I know that yourself and MP Cox and a number of the other Indigenous MPs normally adorn yourself with some of your traditional wear. What are your general thoughts on that, or whether or not that is something that should be allowed?
Indeed, I have written a number of posts on this issue. And what I've said is that all of us, all human beings, when going through history, when they started the human race, so to speak, our people, our human beings, were only clothed by hair. We hadn't, cotton. We hadn't even the But then eventually things changed, and then we began to wear, sheepskin, animal skin, and then we have moved on to different levels. And right now we are at a stage where you can see that I am dressed with the parliamentary, approved gear, but at the same time I have my bead. And if you notice,
Yes.
it's the jaguar, and it signifies strength, purpose, that being able to get things done. And that's what we stand for on behalf of the indigenous peoples. I would just go further to say that I was not very pleased to see one member of parliament come into parliament with just laps and exposing parts of his body. Because every one of us in parliament could go into our culture and go far down the line where we can, come to parliament in clothing or in gear that can offend somebody else. And to me, that was somewhat offensive, and it was, used to highlight a personality problem of the person. But anyway, he's not there anymore, and I think we are on the right track to be well clothed and be able to show our culture in other ways, apart from displaying our bodies. Thank you.
Right. I'm happy that you would have spoken on that. Now, the business of the parliament is happening as we take a look at what is happening there on the floor. I'm wondering if you want to share your thoughts on any of the issues brought up today. I know they're taking comments on the single window bill, but I know maybe if you want to offer any comments on any other thing. But let us take a quick comment from you on this single window, and then we're going to go to Amanza. Let's take a quick comment on you on what your thoughts on that bill, and then we're going to go to Amanza Walton Desir, who's on the floor right now.
Okay, I just want to say that I am personally happy, and I'm sure that people of Guyana will be happy that this bill is being sent to a special select committee. And
Yes.
it was a big battle leading up to that. People do not know what happened in the back door, but the back rooms, but we had lots of discussion, and we have managed to make it happen. Kudos to the opposition, and kudos to the minister for accepting.
Right. I know we're going to take Amanza now, but hopefully later in the day we can have you back to talk about more of what is happening in Parliament. But we have MP Amanza on the floor. We want the audience to get a chance to hear her. Thank you.
Public space in connection with the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Home Affairs, please be advised that we intend to ask the following questions at the next sitting of the National Assembly. One was the permanent.
Honorable member, if you have a problem with my ruling, you're free to bring a motion against me and have it debated here. And I know, honorable members, please. Honorable members, please. And I quoted the relevant line because you don't advise the speaker, you seek leave, regardless of what matter it is. You may proceed substantively with your contribution.
Mr. Speaker, I will say this, that I understood exactly what you said this morning. I understood it very clearly, and I have made the point that I feel as if, as a member of this National Assembly, you did me a disservice.
Honorable member, when I apply the standing orders, to the questions and to any matter in the assembly, I apply them based on convention, based on the letter of the standing orders before us. And I cannot determine how a person will feel once a decision is made.
Absolutely,
I don't deal
you're
with
right
the
about
emotions,
that.
I deal with the
No,
rules.
you're absolutely right about the fact that you cannot determine how we will feel. Mr. Speaker, I think I have made my point on that matter.
And I think I've made mine.
So I will proceed now. Mr. Speaker, I want to make a few points of clarification because I noticed that my colleague, the Honorable Vincent Henry, was continually interrupted when he spoke about the Amerindian Act. But Mr. Speaker, well, I will tell you how it is relevant, Mr. PM. This morning, your side sent an amendment that says, in the event of any conflict between the provisions of this act and those of any other law, the provisions of this act shall prevail. You have opened the door for us to talk about any law of this side that we wish to speak on. That is what that means. And so for you to attempt to curtail my colleague when he speaks about the impact of this on the Amerindian Act, now we know who not reading and who don't understand. It's there. I will respond to Mr. Darren Lal in due course. It's a good thing, you know, people don't take him too seriously. Mr. Speaker, I want to go on record as saying that we support efficiency, we support ease of doing business, and we support, in principle, this notion of a single window. We are on record as saying that. So I want my colleagues on the other side to understand that when you attempt to do your press to say that we are against business and we are against efficiency, that the people of Guyana will weigh you in the balance and find you wanting, because we are on record as saying that we support it. That must be made pellucid. That must be, if you listen, Mr. PM, you will hear the point that I am making. You will certainly hear, don't worry. Mr. Speaker, let me say this. Let me say this, and I think I've been very clear. We support the bill, we support efficiency, we support the ease of doing business. I have repeated just for emphasis and for the benefit of the Honorable AG on the other side. Mr. Speaker, the concerns that we have, however, cannot be ignored. We have to point out that this single window business, while it is relatively new to Guyana, is not new to the rest of the world. And therefore, we have the advantage of not only learning from their successes, but also learning from the pitfalls that we have to guard against. And Mr. Speaker, when you read and you research, you realize that there are a couple of pitfalls that we have to guard against. A lack of accountability. Mr. Speaker, we have to appreciate the fact that this single window system could lead to a diffusion of functions. And when you diffuse functions, you create the opportunity for a lack of accountability. We are not saying don't do it. What we are saying is let us fix it so that it is a pitfall that we could avoid. I am very happy that the minister has taken on our suggestion to have this matter sent to a select committee. We appreciate it. We appreciate it because there are a number of very serious issues that have to be addressed. Another one of the concerns, Mr. Speaker, is this issue of reduced oversight. Mr. Speaker, the effect of what we are seeking here to do is to consolidate a number of approving functions. And in doing so, Mr. Speaker, we have to understand that we are creating the opportunity for a lack of scrutiny. Again, we are not saying don't do it. We are saying acknowledge that this is a risk and let us together figure out how we could put robust measures in place to mitigate those risks. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that we have to be very mindful of is developing the expertise across the approving agencies. We have to be sure that before we roll this out, that all of the agencies involved are at a bare minimum on an equal level of expertise. I don't have to read and spell for us the dangers of that not being so. Again, we are not highlighting this as a hindrance to the bill. We are highlighting it with the view that we can, in the select committee, find a solution to it. Mr. Speaker, the other issue that we have to guard against is the potential for bias. And I smiled there because I heard my colleague before me in his, I don't know what that was, in his presentation, spoke about the removal of political interference. Mr. Speaker, I want to read for us from the bill itself. From the bill itself, it is section 22 of the proposed bill. 5, subsection 5. What does it say? It says the decision of the Planning Appeal Tribunal shall be final unless the minister declares the matter to be one of national interest. So the minister, without any circumscription that guides this discretion, can declare a matter of national interest. So if he doesn't want to deliberate on a matter, oh, it's a matter of national interest. Mr. Speaker, that is dangerous, and that is not decentralizing it politically. Mr. Speaker, let me continue. It says, if a declaration under subsection 5 is made, the decision of the tribunal shall be reviewed by the cabinet. But we're depoliticizing it. But the appeal is to cabinet. But we're depoliticizing it. So basically, we are trying the devil's case in hell. Right? Okay? So when you have, for example, and I noticed the AG on the other side is saying, oh, it is only in relation to national interest. The fact remains, sir, that you cannot have a minister declaring that. The reality is that it is highly unlikely that cabinet will disagree, and you can therefore see very clearly how this provision allows somebody who may not be a friend, a family, or a favorite of this government being prejudiced in their application. And that is the point that I am making. So when you talk about removing political interference, Mr. AG, or I'm sorry, Mr. Darmlal, who has left the dome, this is the epitome of putting it in the middle there, because what it means now is that if Honorable Ramjitan wants to put up a building, they can declare that it is in the national interest that he doesn't, and then they will take it to cabinet and they will say that cabinet says no. Having removed the right of Mr. Ramjitan to appeal to a judge in chambers, which was occasioned when they revoked that section 16 of the Tongue and Country Planning Act. So that is what they have done. They have removed the right of a citizen to appeal to a judge. And they're sending it now to cabinet. Right? So we're going to try the devil's case in hell. Again, Mr. Speaker, you see, this is the problem that I have with the PPPC. Every opportunity they have to engage in mischief, they take it. Every opportunity. And so they go there and they say to the people, oh, this is about the ease of doing business, and so on and so on. But couched in this same legislation are all of these nefarious provisions. This is why you got to watch them closely. You got to watch them. The other day it was, oh, a red wave. When you do get down to the bottom, dead people sign, people overseas sign. But there's this big red wave. Right now, people are at Belladrum being paid $20,000 to put a name on the nomination form. You gotta watch them. The people at Wakenham were visited by a minister to say, take your name off the list. You gotta watch them. You gotta watch them, the Honorable Indar. You gotta watch them. So they come with all of these nice things. Oh, we want the ease doing business, and we gotta move up on the business index, but couched in it is the wickedness and totalitarianism that we on this side of the house will forever stand against. Mr. Speaker, the other recommendation and the other observation that we've made is that, look, and maybe Anil as the honorable member, Nandlal, could look at the drafting, because there is a paucity of offenses in this bill. There is an offense created for confidentiality breaches, but certainly you are dealing with a system that people can hack, that people can deliberately cause to malfunction, and certainly this must be countenanced in the bill and the appropriate penalties put in place. So we need a stronger, more robust enforcement in this bill, because as you have acknowledged, it deals with serious issues, it deals with sensitive information, and based on the rantings of Mr. Honorable Nigel Darmlal just now, we're not very confident in the ability to deal with confidential information.
Integrity Commission does some big leaks.
Because the fact that he could tell people about who owns in bill and who owns properties where, when MPs are duty bound to declare that to the Integrity Commission, tells us that they have a difficulty with being confidential. And that posture, sir, undermines the system. Mr. Speaker, look, the other issue that we want to look at, and I think in this regard, my colleague, the Honorable Ganesh Paul, moved some amendments, and so I believe he is speaking, and I will therefore defer to him to move that. But we need, as a matter of urgency, to have clearly spelled out this committee, this appeals tribunal, because if you look at section 22, what it says is that there is hereby established a plan in appeals tribunal for the purpose of hearing appeals against decisions of the central authority made pursuant to this act and any other enactment in respect of planning and development applications. The constitution of the procedure of the Planning Appeals Tribunal, the constitution and the procedure of the Planning Appeals Tribunal shall be prescribed in regulations. In regulations. So you are giving a body appellate functions, and you do not bring the constitution and the procedure requirements for this tribunal in the principal legislation. You bring it in regulations. Completely unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. There has to be spelled out very clearly how this tribunal is going to be convened, how it is going to be constituted, particularly because you are proposing to vest it with wide and sweeping powers. Mr. Speaker, it should be in the primary legislation. And the lawyers over there like to tell people that they're not lawyers. They want to sneak it in because they know that the regulations are not subject to the level of scrutiny that the principal legislation have. So for all of you, Anil, the Honorable Nandlal will tell you that I am correct. A grave matter like this should be in the principal legislation and subscribed to and scrutinized on the floor of the House. Because this is somebody, they want to deal with it in cabinet. They want to try the devil's case in hell. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Watch them.
Gotta watch them. You have to watch them. The other point, that I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is that we have to contemplate the possibility that this bill really does, and as referenced by my colleagues on the other side when they spoke, really does whittle away at the powers of local authorities. And so we have to be very clear, and I welcome the select committee because this will give us the opportunity to hammer this out. Because the Constitution is very clear on local governance. The Constitution is very clear in Article 13 about inclusionary democracy, and it goes on to say particularly for people in their localities and making decisions that will affect their local lives. Mr. Speaker, it therefore means that if there's a possibility that this bill would offend the constitutional provisions on local governance, we have a duty as this House to correct it before we send it forward. We have a duty, Mr. Speaker, and we cannot shy away from that duty. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to end by making an observation, and this comes from my experience working in the civil aviation sector, that we have to be careful. We have to be very careful on the back end how we are integrating these permissions and who is pronouncing on these permissions, because there are safety and security considerations that attend, for example, the maritime sector, the aviation sector, and this is why we just can't have any and everybody that the government would think suitable on this tribunal. And this is why we have to not exclude This is why we cannot exclude the review of the court, Mr. Speaker. So I wanted to flag those points. And again, I want to make it clear, lest the propagandists on the other side run away to say that we are against progress, that we are not against progress. We are not against efficiency. We support in principle the bill, but we are highlighting these pitfalls so that we can avoid them, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we have been doing that. We warned when they brought that motion about the Public Accounts Committee, what you will see. We warned about the Natural Resources Fund and the abuse that we would see. We warned, and we are warning now that this has to change, or else the people of Guyana are going to be done a great disservice. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And now for the Honorable Member, Ms. Onesh Warren, the Honorable Minister of Tourism, Industry and Commerce.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
All right, folks. Following the debate there, you just heard from Amanza Walton Desir, who is the Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, speaking there very fervently, very, strongly about the pitfalls that we need to avoid in this bill, and highlighting the fact that, look, the opposition is not against the bill in principle. They're not against the bill in principle, but she would have flagged a number of issues that the opposition would have flagged before. And this is why the bill has now been sent to that special select committee, because there are a number of issues, some of which I was speaking about before she came on, about this idea of stripping the powers of those local bodies. And as we continue on that, we want to invite back Mr. the MP Vincent Henry to the conversation as we continue to talk about how this bill affects Guyanese. And I'm sure that MP Henry has some more thoughts about would like to share some more thoughts about how this bill would affect his constituency and the people that he represents. Mr. Henry, I'm sure you listened to Amanza just now articulating the opposition's concerns about the effects that the bill will have and hoping that these amendments will be taken on board. I know that you spoke about how it would have affect the indigenous people, and like she would have mentioned, those local bodies also include those indigenous villages, and I could imagine where Guyana is going and all the construction that is happening will come to a point where something will happen in those communities in terms of buildings or whatever, and those village councils will not have a say. Your thoughts? Your microphone, I don't think your microphone is on. Right, let's get that sorted and we'll come back to MP Henry. I think his microphone is sorted now. Yes, MP Henry, go ahead.
I was saying when I first heard of this bill, I thought that automatically in my mind that the Amerindian Act of 2006 would not be subjugated to it. It wouldn't be, submerged by this bill. And so when I read it and I saw that it's like an overarching bill that, covers all enactments that were done before, that includes the Amerindian Act, and I got terribly worried. Because in one stroke of a pen, the People's Progressive Party is, putting things in place to take away the rights of the indigenous peoples. Yes. And the thing is that people do not understand that the indigenous peoples live as indigenous peoples. We don't live like, people on the coast or people in America, or Japan or whatever. We have our own culture. And our culture is one where we depend on the land. The land is our mother. The waterways, the land, the atmosphere that we have around us, that's our mother. And without that, we will be nowhere. And so I was terribly worried. I was at home, and I, when I joined the meeting, a meeting being held in town here by Wi-Fi, I automatically said that I would like to speak on this bill because it's going to do total damage to indigenous people. But the thing is that the People's Progressive Party just doesn't care. They, to me, they would like to get everything for themselves. They might give you a little bit of the leftovers, crumbs, but the real meat of it, they will want to hog it all. And just imagine somebody, let's say, doing a tourism project near or within a marine community. They don't even have to, they just have to apply through this window system, and the amount of secrecy that's there, we may wake up one morning to hear that the project has been approved. And then our people end up losing, our people end up suffering, things like that. So I am so happy we have had a chance to
MP,
express.
I'm happy you brought up that
ourselves.
point because I'm happy you brought up that point because we were listening to MP Amanzo Walton just now, and she would have noted that the process for recourse. Let's just say that you mentioned there a tourism project happening next door in an Amerindian area, an indigenous area, and it's affecting the community. You cannot go to a court and say, hey, this thing is affecting us in this way and we want it stopped. You have to apply to this tribunal, and then of course this idea of taking it to cabinet and cabinet deciding that, hey, this thing here, it benefits national development and hence we have to continue the project, right? So that is something that I know that MP Walton Desir is in studio, and I listened very carefully to her presentation, but I see that as a big issue. I don't know if you want to comment on that, and then MP Desir can come in.
Well, that's what we heard before from the other government speakers. They were saying that they're trying to make this become an apolitical issue. But if anybody who knows the PPP would know that they, by their own animalistic nature, they will never allow, politics to be far from them. They see politics as one to gain for themselves, and like we always say, friends and family. And that is what they're about, at the expense of even the indigenous peoples whom they depend on to get votes, to win an election. So our people will have to know that the PPP government doesn't care about us. They care about themselves, they care about their friends, families, cronies, and they care to get rich. I don't know what they will do with the richness, where they will carry it. Where will they carry it? They can't carry it to the graves.
Yeah. MP Desir, you went, thank you very much, MP Henry. MP Desir, you went to great lengths to ensure that you stated that the opposition does not oppose this bill in principle, but it opposes you're highlighting some of the pitfalls so we can avoid it. Great lengths to ensure that people understand that we're not against business, we're not against ease of business. But many persons have seen this bill as another attempt to consolidate power at central government, and calling for greater review into those issues, especially when it comes to stripping the power from local organs. Your thoughts?
Well, the bill is the proverbial Trojan horse, because what it is doing is seeking to use a vehicle of good to introduce something very toxic into our legal framework. And it is seeking to undermine the local authorities and their rights to pronounce on the development of their communities. It goes against the very spirit of local government. And so they have sold it to the members of the public like this is something that's good for business, it's good for ease of doing business and for efficiency, which, if managed correctly, it can be. But they have also, in one fell swoop, attempted to accomplish an undermining of the local governance. And that has to be wrongly rejected. If they're going to implement this, they must do it properly. They must be able to integrate local government functions across the country into this system. Because, like I pointed out, it's not new to the world, it may be new to Guyana. And so we have the lessons to learn. So, why are we as a people content to have to learn the hard way when we can look at the pitfalls that other jurisdictions might have endured and avoid them for ourselves? So I'm very glad that they took our recommendation and they will be sending the bill to a select committee, because that is the least that they could do for the Guyanese people.
Yeah. MP, I was making some notes on some points that and following the comments on the Facebook page. There are some things that might be a little difficult for people to understand because, of course, the public isn't reading the bill in detail. So maybe you can shed some light. There is the tribunal and the role of the tribunal, and then, of course, the cabinet, and how that will affect when they affect somebody who's applying for permit, when they have a contention. And so maybe you can shed some light and simplify that for the people out there.
So look, for example, the Town and Country Planning Act has a provision that says if a person who has made this application is aggrieved, they can apply to a judge in chambers, invoking the protection and scrutiny of the court. That provision has been repealed because that, among other provisions, they've repealed provisions of the Public Health Ordinance. They have even repealed provisions for the Guyana Lands and Surveyors. So this is the point that we're making. They're using sleight of hand to achieve nefarious means, and we have to wrongly reject it. So now, when someone is affected by a decision, it goes to a tribunal. They've removed the court from the equation. What is most alarming is that there is no instruction on the tribunal and how it is the composition of it. Its remit is unclear, and they have left that for regulations. Now, anyone who understands law, and thank God I'm a legislative drafter by training, so I know what means what when you see it in legislation. Regulations attract a lesser degree of scrutiny and can be signed into force by the minister. Doesn't have to come to the floor of the National Assembly. So you are vesting a body that has the final say on whether I could build a house here or not. We don't know who comprises this, and you have deprived me of the protection of the court. Not only that, you have inserted something there that says that the minister could declare a particular issue to be a matter of national interest. And when he does that, you appeal to guess where? The cabinet. So if Amanza wants to build a house, we know the government don't like Amanza. They don't approve it. The minister could say, "Oh, it's national. It's a matter of national interest." That it is not, or it's against the national interest. That then goes to cabinet. You believe Jack Dale and them boys saying yes? I mean, I'm breaking it down as simply as I possibly can, so the people of Guyana understand that couched in this seeming nice thing about the ease of doing business, the Machiavellian moves that the PPP are making. And this is why we have to be eternally vigilant. And this is why we have to come to Parliament, because had we not come, this would not have gone this way. And can you imagine what would have been released on the people of Guyana? It would mean a further consolidation of power for the friends, the families, and the favorites. That is what it means.
And so now that the bill has gone to this will go to this special select committee, are you confident that those amendments and those issues you would have highlighted will be dealt with in any significant manner, in any significant way, and we'll see a more robust bill?
Look, with the PPP, you can only be sure that they will try to do something underhanded. That is the only thing you are sure about when it comes to this administration. Nothing else you can be sure about. But what we can be sure about is that the members that we will appoint to that select committee will go there and they will represent the interests of the people of Guyana, the poor and the working class, people who don't fall in the category of friends, family, and favorites, to make sure that what comes out is a fair bill. And if the PPP continues on this trajectory, our observations will be in the Hansard for public record. And so when come next election, the people of Guyana vote them out, we will then be able to reverse the draconian laws that they are putting in place and put in place laws that will see Guyanese being able to enjoy a good life.
Yeah. MP, I've been asking all of the people on the show to give their thoughts on the local government and the revelations of the fraud that has been uncovered. I would like your quick thoughts as we wrap up on local government and on what's happening so far.
Fraud is fraud, and we've maintained that. But look, seriously, between the revelations that happened in the recount and these revelations that have happened now with the local government elections, if we as a people do not stand up for a clean voters list and for the use of biometrics at the place of poll, we would be forfeiting that right that our foreparents fought and died and bled for, our right to vote. And it's not only our right to vote, it is about us protecting that right. To the extent that I get up at 6 o'clock to go to cast a vote, and a man who is not even in the country, somebody, or who is in the grave, and the PPP can invoke him and have him vote and then put him back down. That is the degree to which my vote is being undermined. So we have to protect our vote. I think the PPP ought to be deeply ashamed, but it is not an emotion that they have the capacity to feel. This is why Barjangio thinks it's okay for him to apologize to a family because her name appeared, their mother's name, deceased, God rest her soul, appeared on their list of supported signatures. And then not only that, they had the opportunity to redo the list and brought back the same people who have gone to the great beyond again. So this is the audacity that they have. But they want to paint us as the riggers and whatever, but all of the evidence is emerging that they are the riggers. The recount revealed the extent of their malpractices. 47 ballot boxes without statutory documents. Dead people voted. When we said to the international community that votes were cast in the names of dead people, we were looked upon with scorn. But now that these revelations have come about, and people have come out to say, look, my mother is dead. Why is her name and her ID card number on your list? We hope that people begin to understand that there is a foul plot afoot, and we, the people of Guyana, have to resist it. Tomorrow, as you know, we usually assemble in front of GCOM. I want all who are interested in real democracy prevailing in this country to come out there and let GCOM know that they have to fix this nonsense. We cannot proceed to an LGE with all of these irregularities and hope to foster any kind of confidence in our electoral system. And it's all downhill from there unless we stem it. A new voters list and biometrics at the place of poll. So that when I put my finger, it must say this is Amanza, this is Randy, this is Vincent.
Yeah.
So we have to become a lot more vigilant. I want to go on record before we conclude as to thank those of our supporters and those of the people who work with us in the level of vigilance that has been displayed. Had you not been this vigilant, the PPP would have gotten away with all of this skullduggery. And so now we're seeing that this big red wave that they spoke about on nominations day, including
big red lie,
people overseas, and it was nothing but a big red lie.
MP Amanza Walton Desir, Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, and of course, MP Vincent Henry for bringing the issues of your community to the fore. I think MP Ganesh Maipal is on the floor. Just a bit interruption there. We'll go to the floor of the House and we continue with those comments on the bill. Thank you very much, MPs. And we will continue our broadcast as we take MP Maipal. I think there's some conversations happening now, but MP Maipal is on the floor. We'll take that and we'll be right back with you.
I would say that you're crafty enough to be able to couch good words with
Thank you
respect
very
to the
much,
honorable
sir.
members.
Sir, my only concern was that when the minister wishes to speak about them, she should say us, because she was part and parcel of the APNU AFC government. That is my only concern, sir. Sir, but allow me to begin by first thanking the Honorable Minister of Housing and Water, Mr. Colin Crowell, for meeting with a team from the opposition members of Parliament, concerning this important piece of legislation that without a doubt is premised on bettering the manner in which business is conducted in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. It baffles me, though, I must say, as to why, when we met with the Honorable Colin Crowell and the opposition team, why is it that the Honorable Minister within the Ministry of Housing and Water, Ms. Susan Rodriguez, was not there? But, Mr. Speaker, after listening to the Honorable Susan Rodriguez's presentation on this bill, I now clearly understand why Honorable Colin Crowell kept her away from the engagement. And moreover, the conclusion that her presentation was merely to save face is well understood on this side of the Honorable House. Notwithstanding Honorable Minister Susan Rodriguez, shallow and nothing of substance presentation, allow me, sir, to touch on two observations she made. First, she said that when the APNU AFC was in office, we did nothing to pass a legislation of this nature. Sometimes I wonder if the Honorable Susan Rodriguez was not existing between 1992 to 2015. 23 years of the People's Progressive Party rule, and we did not have a legislation of this nature either. And many of the members on that side of the House, when they speak, sir, they operate as though Guyana gained its independence in 2015. And they may be very well right, because the punishment that we had under the People's Progressive Party, I can only conclude that indeed democracy reigned in this country from 2015 to 2020. So perhaps indeed that is when legitimacy of a real government existed, from 2015 to 2020. Comrade Speaker, let me say with reference to this bill that the APNU AFC, and I want to make this very clear and put on record for the investors, both foreign and domestic, the business community, the private sector, all of Guyana. The APNU AFC is not against a planning and development single window system bill. We are not against that approach. We support making or having more efficient and effective use of resources. We support and endorse improving compliance. We believe in enhancing security. We believe in enhancing transparency and increasing transparency. We believe in cutting costs by reducing the approval timeline by days. We believe in cutting costs by reducing delays. And equally, sir, we believe in increased predictability. And indeed, as Honorable Minister Colin Crowell articulated, the bill seeks to do that. But the bill fell short of a number of protection for the Guyanese people. And the People's Progressive Party has a track record of always meandering their way through absence in a legislation to take advantage of the Guyanese people. They always look at where there is absence in terms of the law and apply their own belief. And then they torment and degrade and segregate and favor them, their friends, their families, and their favorites. And that is what we will like to protect against. And that is why, sir, we have opted to submit some amendments to this legislation for consideration so that we can make the bill stronger for proper and real democracy and real transparency and real accountability. That is what we target on this side of the House. Sir, my colleagues went in depth to explain a number of aspects as to why it is necessary for these amendments. So permit me, sir, to put on record what are the amendments the APNU AFC is putting forward and what is expected to be deliberated in the Special Select Committee, and hopefully we can find consensus and come back to this House with a strong piece of legislation that can enjoy the full support of the opposition and put forward a bill that will benefit all Guyanese. Comrade Speaker, we are looking to insert Section 8.3. Right now, there is no Section 8.3 in the legislation, and we're asking for that to be inserted. And we're saying that that should read that all fees collected on behalf of relevant agencies shall be remitted to the agencies within 60 days of receipt. And I believe it is important that this be placed in the primary legislation so it guarantees the local authority areas their rightful revenue as garnered or as will be collected by the Central Housing and Planning Authority. And to tell me, sir, to tell me that this will be placed in the regulation and to tell me that you are going to put it in the regulation is just word of mouth. At the end of the day, the regulation is going to be created by the Minister of Housing and Water, and I dare say, sir, we on this side of the House, given the track record of the People's Progressive Party, we don't trust them. So we simply want it to be in the primary legislation. Sir, we are also proposing for Section 13(1) that which currently reads that the unit shall be headed by a director appointed by the central authority in consultation with the minister. If we are talking about removing political forces and strengthening our democracy, then why does it have to be in consultation with a political appointee? Why does the director have to be appointed in consultation with the minister? That clearly shows, and the record is there to prove, the amount of people who are serving in public service positions are there as political appointees who are appointed by ministers of this very government, and they are doing political work. Look at the permanent secretaries in all the ministries that we have. They all have card-bearing, they're all card-bearing PPP members, and they're supposed to be accounting officers, and they're supposed to be employed to meet certain requirements.
Honorable member, you've actually now said all permanent secretaries, and none of them are here to defend themselves. So if you have the evidence they're card-bearing members, please produce it and keep the remarks.
Guided by you, sir, I withdraw.
Thank you.
And I would like to say that we find a problem with this particular part that says with consultation in consultation with the minister, and we are proposing, sir, that it should read section 13.1. The unit shall be headed by a director appointed by the central authority on the recommendation of the Committee of Appointments of the National Assembly. That way we guarantee inclusion, that way we guarantee participation, and we will find a person that fits the criteria to hold such a position with the necessary qualifications that it so demands. Sir, I turn your attention to section 15.3. Section 15.3 currently reads, an administrative scheme may be revoked or modified by a revised scheme approved by the minister. Again, we talk about removing the politics. Again, we talk, sir, about ensuring that this bill does not have politics inside and people are afforded the opportunity to feel safe and not feel as though they have to have some sort of connection to a minister. And we are therefore proposing, sir, that section 15.3 should read, an administrative scheme may be revoked or modified after consultation with the director and other relevant agencies as contemplated by this act. That simply means that all the persons and agencies who are directly involved, the administrative scheme that directly has a role to play in the administrative scheme, would be given that opportunity to participate should there be a need for us to revoke and modify the administrative scheme. So I turn your attention to section 18.2, and section 18.2 currently reads that the committee shall comprise the following members: a chairperson appointed by the minister, the director of the unit, one person appointed by the minister from the private sector, having knowledge and experience of matters relevant to land development and drawn from the areas of business, finance, law, physical planning, natural science, land surveying, and architecture or engineering, and two persons appointed by the minister after consultation with the professional bodies representing professional land use planners, architects, engineers, and land surveyors. Sir, we are simply proposing to add to this list a nominee from the leader of the opposition. And we do so against the backdrop of talking about inclusivity, talking about inclusion so that the country, the population can feel safe knowing that they have that representation on this committee reflects both sides of the house. Sir, section, you want the AG work, that's what I know. Sir, section 19.2, we turn to section 19.2. It currently reads, the committee shall be responsible for implementing the policies given to it by the minister and shall act in accordance with directions given to it by the minister. That is authoritative. That is dictatorial, sir. That this committee that we're expecting to be very independent. In fact, in Honorable Colin Crowell's presentation, he said that this committee will be independent. Now tell me, sir, how is that being independent when you are telling us that the committee must act on your guidance and directive? Sir, we are proposing that section 19.2 should read, the committee shall be responsible for implementing the policies given in accordance with this act and any regulations made thereunder. And we believe that that will show greater adherence to the rules, regulations, and law that governs this entire planning and development single window system. So I turn your attention to section 22.5, and section 22.5 currently reads that the decision of the Planning Appeals Tribunal shall be final unless the minister declares this matter to be one of national interest. Now, this, I think, deprives citizens the right to appeal a decision that is made by one single body. And I heard when Honorable Suzanne Rodriguez said that nobody is depriving, in fact, she said, we do not have to legislate that persons must go to CCJ. But what you did here in this legislation is to tell us that they can't go, because you are saying that the decision is final. In this legislation 22.5, you have put that the decision of the Planning Appeals Tribunal shall be final unless the minister declares the matter to be one of national interest. It means you're depriving citizens that right to express themselves via the court system and to seek redress. And that is why, sir, because we understand the expeditious nature of this kind of system, we are proposing that the decision of the Planning Appeals Tribunal shall be subject to appeal to the Caribbean Court of Justice, which is the final court in the jurisdiction of Guyana. Sir, I turn your attention to section 22.6, and 22.6, we're asking for that to be completely deleted, since the 22.5 will afford the applicant the opportunity to appeal at the CCJ. There is no need for a section 22.6. But whilst we are proposing to delete it completely, we will ask that the following be inserted. The Planning Appeals Tribunal shall be composed of 3 members. And there's a reason, sir, why we will like for the Appeals Tribunal to be listed in this primary legislation, so that persons will know directly who are the persons they're appealing to. If we leave it to the regulations, sir, therefore we are giving the minister the authority to, in his view, if he finds fitting, to perhaps put Honorable Sanjeev Dattadin as the head of the tribunal. And if such happens, we know people who they believe are associated to the APNU AFC will not get through with anything. So we don't want a situation like that. We don't want a situation where the minister will decide single-handedly who shall be the members of the tribunal, because we know how the PPP operate. They have a track record. And it is against that track record that we have to, on this side of the house, put measures in place to safeguard the real people who will be affected, the ordinary people who will be affected. Because the People's Progressive Party is well known for their little clique at the top, friends, families, and favorites, and the ordinary poor citizens suffer at their hands. So these amendments that we seek to bring is to protect the ordinary citizens of this dear land. And we are saying, sir, for section 22.6, that the Planning Appeals Tribunal shall be composed of 3 members as follows: a chairman appointed by the minister who holds or has held office as a judge of a court having unlimited jurisdiction in civil and criminal matters. B, a member appointed by the minister after consultation with such professional bodies representing professional land use planners, architects, engineers, and land surveyors. And C, a member nominated by the leader of the opposition and appointed by the minister who has knowledge and experience of matters relevant to land development and drawn from the areas of business, finance, law, physical planning, natural science, land surveying, and architecture or engineering. So even though we on this side of the house we are proposing these changes, sir, we are not seeking to put political people in these positions, even though the leader of the opposition will be having that opportunity to make a nominee, to put a nominee forward, the person must have knowledge and experience of matters relating to land development and issues surrounding this bill. And likewise, even though we are giving the minister the opportunity to appoint someone, it must be someone who's qualified to do the job. And I made the case earlier, sir, about a lot of square pegs in wrong hole that currently exists in the People's Progressive Party. And that is what we're simply trying to guard against. We're simply trying to guard against someone who may have served the People's Progressive Party for 20 odd years, and they want to just give them a job, and they just decide to say, look, go and serve on this tribunal and collect a big fat cat salary. Those are the things we are trying to guard against, Comrade Speaker. Sir, when we look at Section 29, Section 29 says this act binds the state. We would like to drop that to Section 30 and insert in Section 29 with the exception, and this is very important. This one is very important, sir. With the exception of the Amerindian Act of 2006, this act takes precedence over any other act it comes into conflict with. And I believe that that is the protection my honorable friend, Mr. Vincent Henry, speaks to and is looking for in this legislation. Sir, another aspect of this bill that is frightening is the conflict it comes into being with the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And my good friend, Honorable Amanza Walton this year, took the time to speak a little on it. But I want to say, sir, that in Chapter 7 of the local, that speaks to local democracy, Article 71 of our Constitution says, local government is a vital aspect of democracy and shall be organized so as to involve as many people as possible in the task of managing and developing the communities in which they live. And Article 74, it shall be the primary duty of local democratic organs to ensure, in accordance with law, the efficient management and development of their areas and to provide leadership by example. Article 75 says, Parliament shall provide the local democratic organs shall be autonomous and take decisions which are binding upon their agencies and institutions and upon the communities and citizens of their areas. I heard a heckle just now how many local authority areas we are contesting in. All that we are contesting in, Comrade Speaker, we have legitimate signatures for. We did not seek to forge any signature, and all that we are contesting in, there are legitimate signatures for them. So we have genuinity on our side, and everybody who signed, they are alive and well. Nobody is dead from this side, that side. They're alive and well. So when we want to talk about transparency, honesty, and who rig and who ain't rig, I say no more about rigging, because I think the Guyana population knows who are the real riggers now. So, but coming back to the Constitution, it is frightening, sir, after interacting with Honorable Colin Crowell and his staff yesterday, I must say that it is frightening that this bill seeks to override that authority that local authority areas have. We simply put a couple of questions to Honorable Colin Crowell, and I don't want to say that he looked as though he was lost, but I think he was worried too. I believe Honorable Colin Crowell was equally worried when we raised those concerns with him, and it is as though, sir, they did not contemplate that they are violating the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. And perhaps those are all reasons that perhaps caused him to agree that this bill should go to a special select committee. So Honorable Colin Crowell, on behalf of the APNU AFC, I want to thank you for recognizing that this bill requires further scrutiny. This bill requires further inclusivity, and I'm happy that a decision to that nature was taken. I want to thank your staff for putting together this bill. I want to thank them for their hard work, and I know with the full cooperation of the opposition side in the Special Select Committee, we will work hard to bring forward a more robust bill that can reflect inclusivity and can work within the best interest of all Guyanese. On that note, Comrade Speaker, I thank you for the time, and I look forward to being in the Special Select Committee to participate to make this bill better. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Member. And I will say that we are looking to establish that meeting to choose the committee on Friday at 11 o'clock. The notices will go out virtually. And now the next speaker will be the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Robeson Ben.